Hi everyone, welcome back to this TED Talk on Saturday with British Council, Jodel, and iTELL. Thank you for coming. Good morning for the participants from the UK. Good evening from Indonesia. Then if you're in Vietnam, it's also good evening. Thank you for coming. There are a lot of participants coming in. We're going to have two speakers today. One is Liliana from the UK and Frances Sinano from Indonesia. So welcome back, and we're going to talk about nurturing autonomous language learners. Thank you for joining with us. Then Joe, are you there, Joe?
I am indeed. Thank you ever so much, Bhagjati. So we're really excited for today's session, as with all these sessions that we have as part of the Saturday Tech Talk. Thank you so much for everybody coming along on your Saturday morning for people in the UK, and Saturday afternoon and evening for people in Southeast Asia and further afield. I see from the chat we have people from all over, from all over the world, which is just amazing, from Australia and from Ecuador and so on and so forth. So,
good.
As Bhagjati has said, the focus today is on autonomous learning, and it's my absolute pleasure to be introducing Liliana Hurtado-Reid, who's going to be talking about autonomous learning and her research around this area. She's a real expert in this topic from the UK. And I'm going to hand over to Liliana in a moment. But Liliana and I have met a couple of times. She's spoken at different events on behalf of the Association for Language Learning, and I know that she's a real expert in this area. So I'm really delighted that you've agreed to present to us, Liliana. So if you'd like to join us now and say a little bit about yourself as an introduction, and then share your screen, and we'll be ready to go. And I'll be collecting the questions as per normal. So if you have any questions for Liliana, and then later for Francis, please put them in the Q&A. If you have any comments, put them in the chat as well, and then I will be collecting them along with other people, and we'll put a couple of questions to Liliana at the end of her session, and then the same with Francis, and then we'll have a longer Q&A section at the end. So I'll hand over now to Liliana for this fantastic session around autonomous learning.
Well, good morning, everyone. Good morning, Joe. It's fantastic to be here, and thank you for inviting me. As you know from previous talks, they have been very, very informative. I really hope that what I'm going to share with you can be of use. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my passion, which is autonomous learning. So I'm going to share my screen now, and I'm going to tell you a couple of things about myself and the work that I have been doing. Okay. Let me just stop my video. Fantastic. So, okay, should be back here. Great. So a bit about myself. So I am an MFL teacher. I have been working in the UK since 2004. I am currently working at Thomas Gainsborough School, where I have been working for the last 11 years. Before that, I used to be a language teacher, an English teacher back in Colombia. I was there for about 10 years. And I also work for an exam board as a senior examiner for A-level Spanish and occasionally GCSE. I have had the pleasure to present at the Language World and Linguoscope conferences, and today I'm here to tell you about my passion, which is autonomous learning. So why autonomous learning? At university, I took an interest in independent and cooperative learning, and it became the topic of research for my dissertation. Teaching English back in Colombia, I found myself in a mixed ability classroom with up to 40 students. This really forced me to change the approach as was told to use, assess the students and group them according to their ability. Then I created a curriculum appropriate to the needs of each group. This was formed by a series of tasks with clear instructions and assessment criteria, which allow students to work independently. This resulted in them getting actively engaged in their language learning. Once I was in the UK, the mixability context was a recurring reality in Spanish classrooms due to the low number of students compared to more established languages. However, it has gone from being an after-school club to one of the most popular languages taught in the school. I have always enjoyed learning languages, and I taught myself French up to A-level, which was giving me first-hand experience on autonomous learning. I was also particularly fascinated by the art portfolios at school, which could easily show the progression of the students over a long period of time. They were brilliant for giving and responding to feedback and made students feel very proud about their work. And towards the end of my research, I became pregnant and had to leave for maternity leave. And unfortunately, the results in the exams of my students were affected. This meant that in preparation for my second maternity leave, I trained my students much harder on the use of the portfolios and autonomous work. This work was worthwhile as the students were focused on the work and the results went up. When I was doing my research, I found that not everybody would be ready to be autonomous. And it's very important for us to understand what autonomy is. And part of the research, and I found this quote that I think summarizes a lot what autonomy is in the classroom. It's actually making students feel that they have the control and the responsibility for their own learning over and above responding to instruction. Now, as I said before, not everybody is ready for it. So the role of the teacher is really to prepare them for that. So then the three questions that I really wanted to work on were, can students be responsible for their own learning? How can the teachers promote learning as a lifelong experience and not just preparing for an exam, which is quite a reality in our context? And also, how can we adapt the resources that we already have to create a learning environment focused on autonomy, so not necessarily doing everything from scratch, but actually recycling things that we have already worked on. So these are some of the examples of the resources I use in my research. I designed and I adapted some resources. For instance, this is an achievement and motivation survey that allows the students to reflect on their own performance and success. So I use these especially after they've done an assessment for them to think, okay, so what have I done and what can I do better? This is a sample of a detailed lesson plan that I would share with students in some lessons. They could start by checking that they have all the resources they need, and they choose the order in which they could approach the activities, which sometimes it's just as simple as giving that choice in the lesson, and they feel a little bit more in control. Most of them will follow the structure that you have already sort of set up there. But with the time, they find that perhaps they enjoy doing reading first, or they want to work on grammar, or they want to focus on something, and giving them that flexibility and to some extent trusting them is really, really encouraging. This was very successful when I needed to give personalized feedback to students following an assessment, as I was confident that all students were on task. Also, once they are familiar with this format, students can follow it even if the teacher is not with them. And it's surprising to see how much they can do without you. If you have set up the context, if you have set up the resources and you have planned them really well, sometimes they work better without you. But at least that's what I found, that sometimes I talk too much and I distract them. But once they are fully trained, then they can get on with it. And then I have time to focus on those students who are not ready for independence, who need more support and who struggle a little bit. These are support sheets that allow the students to have a basic interaction at the start of the lesson. So they will be able to say the date, weather and time, and that will help us also help them with tasks that require frequently used language. So I created this actually when I started teaching French, and my French, well, I mean, I was, as I said earlier, I taught myself French. So I really need to have like a list of all the key things I needed to use in the lesson. And I thought, well, okay, if this is helping me, perhaps it's going to help other students as well. And I created them, and we have adapted them for French, German, and Spanish. And it's something that the students use every single day and really make them familiar with that language. I use the models designed by the Council of Europe for the European language portfolio, and I adapted them into a version for Spanish. You can see that there's a portfolio for primary schools and a portfolio for adults, for young adults. So I sort of mixed them a little bit and created my own version. So I created mi portfolio de español, so my Spanish portfolio, and I shared that with the students, and I told them that the focus of it was to keep a record of the progress in Spanish, to record how they learn languages, to keep up some examples of work that they have done in languages, to show what they can do in Spanish, and to organize their independent work. And obviously that would help them to prepare for assessments. So what were the key findings of my research? So after I use all of these resources and I interview students and I work in different contexts, I realized that by letting go and allowing students to be more independent, there's greater awareness of self-motivation and independent work following the motivation surveys, learning conversations, and the review of the portfolio. Most of the students became more proficient in the organization and use of resources in their portfolios and took pride in their work. I was sharing, for instance, a couple of months ago, folders, dividers, and explaining some students how to use them. They are 14-year-old students, which were completely overwhelmed by the fact that they had never had a folder, let alone dividers, and think about how they had to organize the work. And I was saying to them, the fact that they have control over that means that they can go home, get their own folders, organize their own work, organize all the worksheets that the teachers have spent hours preparing, and instead of just putting them at the bottom of the bag and losing them, actually keeping them and being able to use them again. And gives them a lot of pride and a lot of, it's a brilliant resource that they can use in any subject. Those students given more opportunities of autonomous work enjoyed planning their personal learning and working with little support from the teacher. You are probably familiar with those students who are very, very able, and perhaps in some instances they feel a bit perhaps delayed because you are teaching from the front, you are trying to get to everybody, you are trying to make sure that everybody understands, and they understood with the first instruction and they just want to move on. And when you give them the opportunity to just get on with it, they really, really appreciate it, and they thrive because they know exactly what to do. And if you organize the resources properly, then they will do well. They don't need you necessarily all the time to explain what they have to do. They need you to give them feedback on what they have produced. They need you to practice their speaking skills, but they don't need you to tell you, now go to the next exercise. Now this is what you have to do. They can make those decisions themselves. So students were more able to support each other in preparation for exams, and they became used to working with students of different abilities and work collaboratively at ease, which benefited both higher and lower ability students in different ways. Speaking must be at the center of activities to familiarize students with negotiation strategies in the target languages. Students need to be encouraged to use IT in every possible way to promote autonomous learning. Some of them need extra rewards to motivate them to do so. Something that I found really, really encouraging was the fact that not all the students were so able when it came to using computers, and really made me realize that if I can use my lessons to help them to develop those skills, that's fantastic. And on top of that, they learn Spanish, that's even better. So some of them, they were not doing emails, they didn't know how to use Google Drive, they didn't know how to make a folder, to share a folder. So really, this will help them a lot. And obviously, giving continuous and personalized feedback on key pieces allows students to identify their own targets for improvement, which were more meaningful and effective. So as you've heard me talked about the language portfolio. So the portfolio became the strongest piece of evidence of the personal learning journey. So they could see it's not necessarily as beautiful and colorful as an art portfolio, but they can still see all their work. And towards the end of the course, they can see that they have all the elements that they need for revision. It improved significantly the organizational skills from some students. It maximized the use of resources prepared by the teacher and showed clear progression in the revision process, and was used as a baseline for the further studies, especially at A level. So that means that things that they were really proud of, pieces of independent work, independent research, or some grammar work that they had done, grammar summaries, they would take them from their GCSE portfolio into their A-level portfolio once they continue studying Spanish at higher level, which meant they could see that everything that they had done was part of this lifelong journey. It was not just preparation for the exam. That was also easy to showcase for potential students, for potential GCSE students. We just take the portfolios and say, look, this is what I do. And they can actually explore and see, okay, so this is interesting, this is the amount of work, because sometimes it's difficult just to show that. And it was easy to set cover as students knew how to work without the teacher. And to some extent, as I said before, they work better without them. So, having the portfolio as the center of autonomous learning, it is important to consider three key aspects. First of all, the principles of cooperative learning. So understanding that we are in a context where we're going to have mixed ability classes most of the time, where they will be able to do some group work to develop their social and leadership skills. Promoting formative assessment. When you have students working independently, it is easier to have one-to-one conversations with them, to focus on what they have, they are struggling with, and they can set their own objectives, which will help them to self-regulate their learning. And finally, creating opportunities for personalized learning. That means sometimes creating resources where you have different levels and they can choose Google Classroom, and I know that remote learning has allowed us as well to do that, to set different work for different people. So making sure that they are they have their resources that are adequate for their level. So given the remote learning situation that we had last year, we started with last year, I had to adapt this portfolio into an electronic version of it. So this allows students to organize their resources electronically, so I could give feedback and supervise their work while they had the ownership to complete and organize their resources, especially in preparation for exams, which was fantastic because that meant that it was easy to find the evidence that we needed to submit for the exams. I wasn't worried about not having physical resources, and they had all the work that they needed organized. So I used Google Drive. I created a Google slide, and I created this slide saying, well, is it your e-portfolio? And this is for one particular part of the exam, paper 2, film analysis. I gave them this slide with the key aspects of the course. I showed them how I had created the links, and I think that is important that they can see that they can do this. I had linked all the documents and I stored them in my Google Drive. They could see how they could access them, and then they had to create their own copies of the portfolio, so they had create their own folders and links. So this is the film that we were watching and we were studying. So I just created a template with the key aspects of the film study. I didn't go into making it really fancy because sometimes that can take a lot of time. And when you're creating resources for autonomous learning, you really need to make sure that they are clear and they are not going to get distracted, but lots of bits that you're going to put that are necessary. So for instance, once you click, so I use hyperlinks. So for instance, if you clicked on characters, then that would take you to another slide with a similar structure, and students created folders for each section and filed their work there. So for instance, if they clicked on mind maps, that would take them to the Google Drive. So this is, for instance, stylistic techniques, and those are the 4 folders. Each student created that and they managed to file their work there. So that really was easy for me to do regular folder checks, so I can see where they had gaps, and we had conversations about it. Now, these are some other resources that I have used that have really supported autonomous learning during remote learning. Google Classroom has been invaluable during this time, and even in face-to-face learning, all the resources created there have been able to share them with the students to work in the lesson, at home, or while isolating. I just had to make sure that the instructions are clear for them, and I have been able to recycle resources in a much easier way than before. I have also found Quizlet a great tool, and Swansea Academy of Learning and Teaching has created some great resources to show teachers and students how to use Quizlet successfully. So you will find the link there in the presentation, and they have some fantastic guides. Also, if you're interested in learning more about games-based learning, there's a big long reference list that you could use. So it explains very quickly how you can use Quizlet. So it's worth have a look. We have also used ActiveLearn to support students working independently, as it links with our resources in the classroom and can offer immediate feedback for students. Linguascope is also a platform that has proven very successful to support independent language learning. And you can click on the short videos at the bottom and you will be able to find out some information about it. I have also found TeachVid, another a platform that can be very useful to allow students to work independently. It has clear instructions, and once the students are familiar with the layout, they can access lots of great resources to support their listening and reading skills independently. And finally, I have created a Facebook group to share the resources I have used during my research. So that's the link, and feel free to join the group and share your experiences on promoting autonomous learning. So thank you very much for taking part. So that's my email address if you would like to email me and ask for any resources. That's my Twitter handle, and as I said, that's the Facebook group. I'm going to put a link in the notes so you can find the presentation as well. So that's it from me.
Thank you so much, Liliana. That was absolutely amazing. Lovely, really, a really lovely overview of how you've put into practice autonomous learning. I love the way that you've been, sharing all the resources with the students and making it really explicit to them on what they can do to be more independent, and all those fantastic technological tools as well at the end to give people ideas on how they can put this into practice using technology. Perfect. It's absolutely perfect. We've got a few questions. We'll do a couple of questions now, if that's okay, and then we'll do the rest of the questions at the end. So the first question from Eddie from Borneo is, how do you deal with students who have difficulty with autonomous learning? I would imagine maybe if they're not very organized and that sort of thing, what advice would you give for those sorts of students?
Well, I think you have to be very careful that you don't look patronizing with them, but sometimes you need to get the staff and say, I have started with some of them from get all the worksheets from your bag. Okay, so this is how you hole punch them. This is how I put them. This is the direction in which you put them divided. Okay, and sometimes you realize that if they don't overcome those basic things, you cannot just tell them, go and organize your resources, because they don't know how to hole punch things. And it's a basic thing, but if they cannot do it, well, you cannot assume that everybody has been practicing with a hole puncher at home. And that is just from the physical bit, from the technical bit. Now, if you move on to look at the instructions, highlight what you need to do, and you have to sometimes sit down with them. But if you have in a class 5 people that that need that, while the others are getting on, some supporting each other and some working completely independently, well, it's easy to sit down with those 5 until that gets done.
That's perfect. So do you think it's a little bit like riding a bike? Once you've given people enough support to allow them to, take their feet off the ground and move forward with 2 wheels to ride. It's a little bit like that, and then they're away. Then they can get on with work independently.
And the thing is, I suppose it's with the same example. They feel really proud when they can do it, and they feel really proud when you give them. And I know it sounds sometimes like very basic, but the results are fantastic when you give them a worksheet and you say, and then someone says, where shall we file this? And someone shouts, oh, well, this is in the listening section because it was a listening. Oh, yes, sorry. And then you think, okay, my job is done, because they will be able to find resources anywhere online, books. So they don't really need me, because I have given them the tools to be independent, and then they carry on learning languages forever.
That's brilliant. Lovely. Okay, we're going to go for the next question now, which is a bit more to do with research and in particular metacognition. So the question is, would you mind putting some light on how metacognitive instruction can lead to autonomous learning at the end of an intervention or class instruction at the end of the term? Do you have any advice to promote metacognitive instruction, or any questionnaires or tools that you can use to gauge it? So do you use metacognitive strategies in order to promote autonomous learning?
I think I tend to do it to spend a lot of time before the exam and after the exam on those techniques. Before the exams we had mocks a month ago, and we spent about 2 or 3 weeks, well, a couple of weeks actually, working on sample assessments. And I explained to them how we were going to sort of destroy those papers. They were highlighting, they were annotating, they were translating. And I said to them, I don't really care about the answers. You all should get almost full marks after you have really worked through the papers in all possible ways, annotating, possible looking at transcripts, and it was difficult for them to understand that I didn't need the answers. I wasn't worried about the answer. I said, it's the process that is really the important bit. And once they got the results, Then we went through, I did do some forms. I like to do forms for them where they can annotate, okay, what went wrong? What was the topic that I need to do? Then they had to find pages from the revision guide that would allow them to succeed preparing that. I've been using loads of the format. I don't know if you're familiar with the taking Russell notes.
Yes, yeah.
They absolutely love that when I said, okay, grammar work in your revision guide, and sometimes they, can we use Russell notes? So they would do that, and it's really good. It's a tool that has helped me to organize my CPD. So why wouldn't it help them? So yes, absolutely. Spending lots of time having those reflections. Then they can do the learning. They can do the learning at home. They do the learning on Quizlet. They do the learning with the revision guide, but no one is going to train them on those things.
Lovely. That's absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much for your lovely presentation. Thank you also in advance for sharing that in the chat. I'm sure people will find it really, really interesting. And thank you so much for answering those couple of questions. That's wonderful. So we'll do some more questions a bit later on. But next, it's now my job and responsibility, my pleasure, to hand over to Pakjati to introduce our next speaker. Thanks so much, Liliana.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Thank you, Liliana, for the ideas and organizing to be a learning material to be autonomous learner. Okay, I'm going to introduce the second speaker. The second speaker now is from Indonesia. Hi, Francis. How are you?
Hi, Pakjati. Good. How are you?
Good. Yeah, before you start, I would like to introduce you to the audience first. Yeah, Frances Sinanu is a faculty member of English Language Education Department at the University of Universitas Kristen Satya Wacana, that's in Salatiga, Indonesia. Frances has over 20 years of experience as a language teacher, teaching English and teaching Indonesian to foreign speakers in Indonesia and in the US. She obtained her master's degree from Teachers College, Columbia University in the US. She is also the co-founder and also the board member of iTELL, Indonesia Technology Enhanced Language Learning. Okay, Frances is going to share some ideas and also some tools later on for learning independently. Frances, time is yours.
Thank you, Pakjati. And also thank you, Liliana, for sharing. What a wonderful presentation. And you really touch on the theoretical aspect, particularly the planning on how to prepare the students, something that I will definitely apply in my own teaching. But for my part, good afternoon, everybody, teachers. I can see that we have participants coming from all over the world, from the UK, Australia, Ecuador. Oh, wow. And also from Makassar. Hello, I'm currently in South Sulawesi in Makassar, Indonesia. So I'm not going to go into theories. I believe Liliana has already summarized the main thing that we need to consider in preparing our students in becoming autonomous language learners. But I'm going to share from my teaching context, from my teaching experience, some digital technologies, digital tools that I've used with my students that help them to become more independent in their language learning. So first of all, I would like to introduce my teaching context so that you understand when I share how I apply the tools in my class, that I'm teaching at the university level, and it's an English language education department. So we prepare pre-service English teachers, and their age the range above 18 to 22 years old. So adult learners, they don't really need a lot of preparation in terms of technology. They are the millennials generation, and we are located in Central Java. Although now with the remote teaching, I'm not in Central Java. But why this is important? Because I'm focusing on speaking classes. Those are the courses that I mostly teach at my department. So in addition to prepare the student teachers to become English language teachers, we also prepare their English language, because even though the ideal is that when you enter the English language education department to become English teachers, you must have at least intermediate or upper intermediate English language ability, but that's not the case. And why I put Central Java there, the context, is because I believe the students, they only speak English when they are in class. As soon as the class ends, they will go back and speak Javanese, they will speak whatever their local language, they and not English. And that's why having speaking classes are very important to practice, to make sure that the students can practice their language. And this is where the technology comes in, and the technology can help with this situation, in my opinion and in my experience. I'm gonna also I'd highlight that my contact is EFL, teaching English as a foreign language. Going back to the fact that we don't really have English speakers where the students can go out and practice. It's different from when you're doing in-country English language learning in the UK or Australia or other English-speaking countries, but we are in Indonesia. And also some of the apps that I use are only for English language. So if you are teaching other languages, you might come up with a different app that you have already used. Okay, so let's see. I'm gonna share the first one here. This is one of my favorite success stories, or well, when my students use Ori. Ori is an app for public speaking. This app was developed for native speakers of English and not for EFL students. When we used Ori, okay, thank you, Thor. You can check on the link there in the chat box. When we started using Ori back in 2017, in our speaking classes at the English department of my university, it was still free, and we can ask the students to practice using Ori. So as I mentioned earlier that we are located in Indonesia with no native speaker teachers, Ori really helps the students working with their pronunciation in their English speaking classes. So what I did, well actually we did, because it's a team teaching with 6 parallel classes. The students will prepare the impromptu speech using the 1-minute free feature from Ori to practice their speech. And then Ori will generate transcript immediately that the students will then revise or look at the transcript and identify if the transcript was wrong because of the mispronunciation, then they will practice and improve. So I did a research on this already in 2018, and this is what I always shared because I really believed it helped my students. So this is Monica, and Monica sent me this email. Good evening, Francis. This is my 20th recording. So what happened here is, if you click, I will give you the link to the materials later, and you can click on the recording results and the transcript, and also you can listen to her talking. Obviously an improvement from the original, the first recording. But what impresses me the most is that the students took their time to record 20 times. If you're in class, you don't have the time and the hour to wait for your students to repeat their speeches for 20 times. But with the technology, that is doable. And that's why what I found when I interviewed the students, 15 of them, they said that they feel that they improve their pronunciation from the repeated practices. Also increase in language awareness from studying the transcript, and because this is a speaking class where they have to make presentations, they can also read the transcript and improve their organization of ideas because they don't really have to write down the outline. The AI, the Ori created the transcript, and they can just check and then organize the order of their thought to make the speech more coherent and the better flow. So this is with Ori. Unfortunately, Ori is not free anymore. So the students, now I cannot use Ori in my speaking class. This is back in 2017. So what I use now is many things, and I'm going to share 3 that I use at the moment. Flipgrid. Now Flipgrid is also good because it has video that the students can practice their speech when they practice their presentation. They can look at the camera and they can record themselves talking, and then after that Flipgrid will generate a transcript. And again, they can check, they can look at themselves, and if they don't like it, they can re-record. And we always ask the students to just submit the best one. And when I said the best one, because Indonesian students, at least my students, they are grade oriented, they would like to get a good grade, they will practice more, they will repeat. And also because Flipgrid has all those video features, they would like to play around with all the emoticon emojis and also all the frames and virtual backgrounds, and it makes them enjoy the repeated process of this speaking practice. Imagine if you do that in class and you have the students repeat the same speech over and over again. It must be not as interesting as this. So the students reported to me that they really enjoyed this activity. And when they have enjoyment, I think going back to Liliana's motivation earlier, it's important in making sure that they will want to learn on their own in the future. And also Zoom. We use a lot of Zoom in this moment of time. So what I ask my students is activate the live transcription in the Zoom. And then what they can do is they can record and they can check the transcript later on. Some did live transcription and just look at the live transcription as they speak, but then it's sometimes also disturbing, so they don't want to do that. They can record. But what happened here is, again, it focuses on the pronunciation. Focuses also, especially in Zoom, on the speaking in front of the camera. Now when you have to do webinars, you can also practice using your AVA, share screen like I just did. I just maximized full screen my Canva slide. That is something that the technology can help your students. They can practice on their own. We don't really need to teach them because they can do it on their own. And then this is brand new for me this semester. I just used this. I don't know if you are familiar with this. I believe some of you have used a lot of the technologies here, and you might want to share in the chat your experience on how you use it and how it helps your students to become autonomous language learners. Here I ask my students to present a biography of someone that they know. So it has to be personal. They cannot find a famous person. They have to interview people, and they have to prepare a biography in terms in the format of a Pachakucha presentation. But because it's difficult for me to check on their presentation, I ask them to use Otter AI to help them practice their speech. And the students reported to me that they really enjoy using it because apparently Otter AI is better than other apps that they are using. So the students are also using other apps. So the students will practice until Otter AI gets it right, and then they upload the final version that they really like to Pachakucha. So I'm gonna I asked my students to send earlier his notes. So this is his notes from the presentation that he did in Otter AI. So he just said that I practice saying over and over again. So if you look at Otter AI here, you can see that when you press the recording and you have free for 600 minutes, I think, a month, and then the students repeat it again, the math, and then until he feels like, okay, this is the correct one. So the students did it by himself, and then when he feels like he's confident enough to upload the presentation, then he uploaded on Pachakucha with the correct pronunciation that he believes is better. So here is the final presentation, and you can also expand in Pachakucha with all the transcript. And this is how my students prepare their presentation independently with the help of the technology. So now what happened here is when the students do not know how to pronounce, they can use Google. This is also another tool. I don't know if you are familiar with this. This is what my students also did. They use Google. They just type any word for the pronunciation. Unfortunately, Google only gives the American pronunciation and not other English pronunciation. But then after they identify that the transcript produced by either Zoom or Flipgrid or Otter AI, Joe said here, dictate options, they can learn by themselves using other. They can learn and they can figure it out using Google, using the internet to make sure that they got it right. So these are all the tools that the students identify their own problems, and then the students repeat, practice until they get it right. But we also had this app for ELSA for English pronunciation, and this is I would say this is not only they identify
Hi there.
themselves.
Nice to meet you. My name is Elsa.
But the app will identify the students' mistakes, and then the app will tell them what is their problem. So when they practice with Elsa, Elsa is like their teacher, and Elsa will let them know that you have a problem with the sh sound, or you have a problem with the th sound, and then the students will have to practice on individual sound in with Elsa. So this is also something that I use in my speaking class with my students, but we don't use it in class. They use it on their own. So all this technology will support the students learning, and then when they come to class, we will just review what's your weakness, what is the language parts that you still need to improve and you need to work on, and that's what happens with these digital tools. So with Elsa, it's actually not free. If it's the free version, you only have limited features, limited pronunciation features. If you pay, then you can actually tailor the students' pronunciation lessons that is suitable for your course according to the student's level as well. But if you take the free version, then Elsa will just give the free one. The students might not need the particular one that Elsa provides for free, but at least it helps. So what we did with our pronunciation students is they work with Elsa individually, and then they create a weekly journal, and then they reflect, and then when we come to class, we just deal with the sounds that they still have problems with. So it really saves the teachers in terms of time. And we did this during the face-to-face time, not during the remote teaching period. Okay, so I think that's all the tools that I would like to share with the teachers here. I can see in the chat that people are using it. Azran said that, okay, your daughter's playmate. All right. Yes, obviously the paid version must have better features, but don't be discouraged, because I've been using the free version to help my students learn and improve in their speaking performances, and they reported that they really enjoyed it. But again, I want to return to my context that I'm at the university level. They don't really have any, they don't need any guidance in terms of technology, but I really want to do what Liliana did with preparing and planning the students. I think it's also important. So, Pajati, I think that's all that I have to share. Let's
Thank you, Francis.
questions. Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much, Francis. I just enjoying listening to your talk. I imagine when I learned pronunciation back then in 1980 something,
Okay.
1980s, where there is no technology at all.
So what did you do, Pa?
And my teacher were really, well, they pronounced that we have to repeat and repeat inside the classroom. And trailing, when I rode my bicycle back home, then I had to memorize things and trail things like that without technology. But yeah, now English is everywhere. Technology is here. The exposure is more, and a lot of resources. Then it's a challenge for the teacher to use the resources and help the students to be an autonomous learner. Yeah, with the abundance of tools and also exposure. Okay, there is one question here so far.
Okay.
That's asking about critical reading. How do you integrate speaking activity, critical thinking, and technology? Do you have any idea?
In how do I integrate? Say it again, Pat. Sorry.
How do you integrate speaking, critical thinking, and technology? So it is two different islands.
Well, critical thinking should be embedded in your everyday lessons, right? So I think technology actually helps a lot in giving students the more tools and freedom to express their thinking. I believe one of the Saturday Tech Talk will talk about that, Pajati, right?
Yeah,
The
yeah,
next
yeah,
one, right? The critical thinking and the digital literacy in the 21st century
yeah,
time. So, how do I integrate in every materials? You just integrate it. You ask students to think. You ask them to be critical. You ask them to respond, to review, to many things. So, and the technology helps a lot. They can prepare video in Flipgrid and give their feedback, response to a discussion. Those are activities that you can do with the technology that will definitely encourage the students' critical thinking.
yeah. Okay, thank you very much. There is also one question. This is a very typical question about low technology. How about the students who live in the suburban area where the signal for the internet bandwidth is not that high? Do you have any suggestion for a low bandwidth text tool that can be used?
Okay, actually, Flipgrid. I use Flipgrid with my students because of the low tech or bandwidth consideration, and I have student teachers from Bengkayang in West Borneo, and also in Jayapura. In my university, we are very proud to call ourselves the miniature of Indonesia because we have students from all over. And during this pandemic, they stay where they are originally from. So I believe Flipgrid was one of the solution for my speaking class where I can see my students in terms of video asynchronously. With Zoom, it takes a lot of bandwidth, but with Flipgrid, they can respond with video. So I can still see the facial expression because when you teach speaking, you have to see people's facial expression, intonation, and all of those factors that Flipgrid accommodates. So, Pa Denny, right, from Sumedang, West Java, we use Flipgrid with low bandwidth and it works perfectly. They don't really have to submit at the same time. They can decide when to submit. So you just have to manage the assignment to make sure that the students, especially if you are teaching younger students, that they don't really have to do it too frequently, but they can do it in a longer period of time that will allow them to get a good internet connection.
Yeah, thank you, Francis. Now also speech to text, text to speech, that might be a good follow-up and with
Right,
but
right.
there's one interesting question here before I invite Jodel and Liliana to join us. What are some topics that you give to your students so that they can practice on their own?
Oh
Yes.
wow! Any topics? What's on the news? What I like to do is I like to ask my students to give. If we are in a face-to-face classroom, I normally start my speaking class with a 5-minute gossip corner,
Mhm.
gossip and news corner. So if the students don't want to talk about something serious, they can stand in front of in the at the corner of the gossip corner and just talk about, do you know this celebrity and that celebrity, as long as they speak. Remember, my students are 18 to 22 years old, right? And if they want to go into more serious topic, they can go to the news topic, like what happened in the news, the current affairs at the moment in Indonesia or around the world. And by doing that, we also integrate the speaking class with other courses in our university, like the reading class when they have to do a critical reading class. That is when they read and they report what they read or what they discuss in a reading class in our speaking class. But that's only about 5 to 10 minutes at the beginning of the speaking class before we go to our materials. So the topic is unlimited. You can just do anything with that. you can use impromptu speech topic as well. That's what I did with my Flipgrid activities. I've just found from the internet and just give them funny impromptu speech topics. I select the ones that are appropriate for my students, that they don't really have a lot of difficult cultural background, so that they can understand and they can respond. I think
Yeah.
that's it, Pajati.
Yeah, I agree with you. Start with gossip things, something that's not important, light, and then yeah, as long as they use English.
English, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Francis. I would like to invite back Joe Dale and also Liliana. There are maybe some more questions that we can discuss here. Joe?
Fantastic. Thank you ever so much, Francis. That was really interesting. And I learned about some new tools as well. I'm a big fan of the transcription option in Flipgrid, and the fact that it is free means that you can use it in freely in any context. I think it's a really amazing tool, and I love the way in which you can use the transcription option in order to encourage independent learning. That's brilliant. So we have a few more questions. Thank you ever so much, everybody, for all your questions. Feel free to add some more if you'd like to, but we've got a few questions to start off with. So I'm going to put the first question to Liliana, if that's okay, and then over to Francis afterwards, which is a really good question. How do you design your materials to meet your students' mixed levels if we're talking about autonomous learning? So this is obviously about differentiation. How do you design the materials so that it meets everyone's individual needs and also encourages independent learning? Liliana, what would you say to that?
Well, here, one of the things that is important is that sometimes we do have resources that are already tailored for foundation and higher students. So it's starting from the foundation, picking the things that you find useful. I think sometimes when you look at the textbooks or any resources, you will find so many resources and so many activities and so many different texts, and they move on to the next thing and they move on to the next thing. And what I like to do is to pick only 2 or 3 or even a couple of good texts, and then just really talk them through. Okay, first identify this, second highlight this, third, and this sort of list of ticks, yeah. And then at the bottom, the challenge. Okay, can you adapt? And that's enough sometimes to see that progression from the kids that need a bit more support and the ones that don't need it. I think another thing that is easy as well is how you give the instructions. If you give the instructions in the target language to begin with, just to get them familiar, and then the last instructions are the first instructions are in English in our case, in the first language, and then towards like halfway through you start moving into instructions in the target language. So then the level of demand increases just by doing that.
Fantastic. Lovely answer. Brilliant. And Francis, what do you do in your classroom in relation to differentiation and autonomous learning?
Well, I think that's the beauty of using the tools, because especially in Flipgrid, because you can give individual feedback to the students, and you can add more materials to help them. You can direct them to resources, and you can actually make it private, so you don't really have to. Students sometimes feel threatened if the teachers give feedback for everybody, and if students are still in a low proficiency level. So I like Flipgrid for that, because you can have private feedback to the students, feed you as well. So that's one thing that I use in my speaking class, because the materials will be the same, but then the feedback will help the students to improve according to the levels.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you. Yeah, I for anyone that's not used to using Flipgrid, I think that private feedback option is wonderful. Yeah, that's a great point. Fantastic. Okay, let's move on to the next question, if that's okay. Great question now. So, what would we say to students who are now in their senior year? Their age range is from 15 to 18. That's for the person that's asking the question. That they need to be autonomous learners. So I'll just start that again. What would we say to students who are now in their senior year that they need to be autonomous learners, as they don't realise or not aware of it yet, the benefit of being an autonomous learner? This skill could help, and the fact that this skill could help them in their university lives later. Any tips Francis, do you want to go first, and then I'll pass over to
I
Liliana?
I like that question, and I like what Liliana did, because I didn't really think about that preparing the students and planning the students. So, and I'm teaching university students level, so it's a whole different territory for me. I give it to Liliana though.
Okay.
I think you need to let them fail. You need to let them realize that they need to. And I do lessons where I give the resources, I plan everything, and I said, off you go. And I had to learn not to freak out with the one who's doing nothing. Yeah, with the one who just looks around. You offer help. Is there anything I can do? Let's try this. And then you leave them and they do nothing. You have to leave them, and then you give feedback to the others. And then you have your lovely pack of stickers, and then you give the stickers, well done, and you promote that. Oh, you worked really hard. It's been fantastic. And that feeling of them feeling, oh, okay. So, and how did they, and I think that's when spending time saying how much the preparation that you did help you to get the result that you got, and what are you going to do next, and make them write that and say, this is a note to my future self. And before you prepare for the next exam, you make them go back to their exercise book and read what they wrote, where they said, I need to take the lesson more seriously. I need to do the homework. I need to do the preparation. And I said, and tell them, you don't need to change loads of things. You are making your own future by taking action, and then if they don't, as I said in my presentation, not everybody is ready for being autonomous. And if you think of it, not every teacher is autonomous. Some teachers need to be told what to do and will follow that. Some teachers are more creative. So some will do it and some won't, but you need to let them see what it looks like when they don't.
That's lovely. And do you find that stickers are still they still work with exam level students? They don't find it babyish.
Goodness. The prettier the sticker, if you can make them smelly, they are even better. I mean, you just can get, they absolutely love that, because it's just that simple reward. But then you combine it with something more serious, which is their own reward. I've done this well, and give them that ownership. But yes, the stickers usually help so much. One thing that I did want to say was that earlier I was referring to Russell notes, but actually I want to correct myself. It's Cornell notes, and on the chat I'm going to put a link to that as well, because this is absolutely fantastic. And if you're not familiar with that, I play that video to all my classes just because it really helps with independence. So I'll do that now.
Thank you so much. And just while you're doing that, Francis, can I ask, when you have these students in their first year at university, is it sometimes surprising, or do you find that sometimes it's surprising how some learners are not particularly autonomous, or have you found that more recently, or some students have become less and less autonomous over time? So let's say 10 years ago, did you find that students were more autonomous, or do you find that they're more autonomous now?
And they are more autonomous now, for sure, especially during this remote teaching. When they cannot see the teachers, then they have to be creative to find resources on their own and learn on their own. That's why when I asked my students to do with Otter AI, the responses were like, oh, this is better than the app that I use. And I was like, okay, so you had a different app, or why didn't you share with the class? So, and when we shared tools, for example, they come up with, there's so many tools, unlimited. So it all depends on whichever your phone can handle, or your gadget can handle, your computer can install. And the students are, that's why I would say that it's more autonomous now, because they have more resources and they can use it on their own. Going back to the stickers won't work for my university students. Motivate them.
Respond to Joe. Actually, with the pandemic, almost 2 years, that the students right now are playing a lot with the internet, and also the junior high and senior high schools, that they usually are not allowed to play with their mobile. then they have to use the mobile for learning now. And parents learn, the environment learns, the students learn. So we're going to have a different type of learners. And after the pandemic, that's what I think. And it's going to be a blended learning, should be applied, I think, because the teacher are ready, the students are ready, and the infrastructure is there. So yeah, will be a new type of education, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's a perfect way to finish the webinar for today. That's brilliant. So hopefully that will be one of the silver linings of the pandemic, that our learners are more autonomous as a result of the strategies that they have had to employ in and out of the classroom in various contexts, and the way in which teachers have supported them and have given them different strategies. It's been a fantastic webinar. I've really enjoyed it. We've had a lovely overview. We've had some lovely strategies. We've also had some fantastic technological tools that people can use straight away. So thank you so much to Liliana and to Francis. And I'd just like to hand back to Pak Jati to wrap us up.
Okay, thank you very much. So this is the end of the webinar for the year of 2021. We're going to have the next session is going to talk about 21st century later in the 2020, the 8th of January. Yeah, the announcement is going to be there. But again, thank you very much to everyone for coming. Now is exit ticket. Please use this, go to bit.ly/exit-stt5, fill in the form, that's for evaluation. Then at the end, you will get the link to download your certificate. Yeah, so don't worry about the certificate, but then you have to answer some brief questions there. Yeah. So thank you very much. Just screenshot that or use your mobile phone to get the QR code and fill that quickly, and then click the submit button, and then you will get your certificate on that. Yeah. So like I said earlier, for next year, we're going to have Toar Semakul, that's from the same university from Francis, very popular singer. So we're going to ask him to sing later on. And we have Sylvia from UK. It's going to talk about the 21st century skills, metacognitive skills. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. We also have another type of webinar, small talk that we have here. I Like Monday, Road to iTELL Conference 2020. That's going to be in July 2020. But before that, we have a small talk we had last time. But this Monday, we're going to have Mate Heri Santosa and Calvin is going to talk about simple research in language classroom. So you'll get the ideas how to do a simple research and then present it later in our conference in 2020. So everyone, thank you very much for coming. Do not forget, if you're interested in this, do not forget to come with us and have a chit chat on that. Thank you. This is a wonderful and a great webinar for all over the world, with more countries participate for this year. Yeah, this is the exit ticket again. Get a screenshot and get your ticket. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Goodbye and
Thank you.
Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
Merry
Merry
Christmas.
Christmas.
Bye bye.
Bye everyone. See you in
Bye-bye.
2022.